this straight. Good charts, man. You know? So.
Cammy.
Got everybody here? Good, okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're here today to talk about gas prices. No shock there. And how the President's policies have made the situation for Americans with regard to gas prices much, much worse. And I want to just mention what President Obama did say back in 2008 when he talked about his energy policies. He said that his policies would make energy prices necessarily skyrocket. And later went on to say he would have preferred a gradual adjustment to higher gasoline prices, but pretty much conceded the point that high gas prices was part of their agenda. His now Secretary of Energy, Dr. Stephen Chu, back in 2008, said, and I quote, "Somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels in Europe," end quote. Pretty stunning statement, and more recently yesterday when he was questioned in front of a House Appropriations Committee and asked about whether the policy was to keep gas prices low, said no. So I think it's pretty clear what their agenda has. It may be the one issue where the President of the United States has kept a campaign promise, because on his watch, since January of 2009, gas prices have doubled. At that time, they were $1.85 a gallon. They're now over $3.70 a gallon average nationwide, and continue to go up. In fact, today marks the 24th straight day that gas prices in this country have increased. And what happens when you see that dramatic increase in gasoline prices is the price at the pump goes up for Americans, which affects families and small businesses, and obviously it also means that there are fewer American jobs because it slows down the economic recovery. Every 1 cent increase in gasoline increases U.S. consumer disposable income by approximately $600 million a year. Now, when I say the President's policies are making it worse, it's because he has no plan, he has no policy other than to block access to areas of domestic production here in the United States. When the President says he's for all of the above, we're flattered, because they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But what he really means is none of the above, because he said no, literally, to all the things that would help ease the supply situation in this country. He said no to the Keystone Pipeline. He said no to ANWR. He said no to offshore production, no to the Gulf, no to streamlining permitting, no to more leases. And Republicans, on the other hand, believe that those are all things that are part of an all-of-the-above strategy. We believe in a real all-of-the-above strategy that includes saying yes to all the things that I just mentioned. And one final point that I'll make is that their alternative seems to be what was outlined by Senator Schumer in his letter to Secretary Clinton when he encouraged her to go to the Saudis with hat in hand and ask them to up production by 2.5 million barrels a day. That's a heck of an energy policy for this country. What we need is not 2.5 more million barrels from the Middle East, but those same 2.5 million barrels produced here at home, which, if you add up the amount that could be produced in ANWR and the Eastern Gulf and the Keystone Pipeline, you would get that amount of oil and more. So we've got a number of us here. Our expert, of course, on Alaska, Senator Murkowski, who's the ranking member of the Energy Committee. Senator Cornyn is going to talk about the Gulf of Mexico, and he's also authored a letter to the President in which he lays out these very arguments about why the President needs to get on board with energy production, domestic energy production. And Senator John Hoeven, who is a former governor, is an expert on pipelines that go across the state of North Dakota, and particularly the Keystone Pipeline, which would also provide great benefits to the oil production that's currently occurring in his state of North Dakota. So I'm going to start with Senator Cornyn, then Senator Murkowski, and then Senator Hoeven.
The letter that Senator Thune referred to has now been signed by a couple of dozen senators, and additional senators are adding their name to the letter, but specifically what it will do, and we'll release it this afternoon, it tells the President what specific steps that he could take to relieve the pain at the pump and to help ameliorate the high and rising gas prices. But let's put this in context. If you're a regular American working family, you're looking at higher food prices. You're looking at higher costs for health care. included as part of the president's health care, one of the consequences of the president's health care bill. And now you're looking at higher gas prices. And you think back about the debate over the payroll tax holiday and how little money by comparison that provided in the pockets of most hardworking American families compared to the amount of money they pay out every year in rising gas prices. But Senator Thune talked about the policies that of this administration that have forced gas prices to go up. And I just want to suggest to you that when you look at the denial of the Keystone XL pipeline that would produce some 700,000 barrels of oil that would be refined in Port Arthur and end up in Houston, the Houston Ship Channel, if you look at the decline in the new drilling leases and permits on federal lands, if you look at the decline in permits for offshore energy development like the Gulf of Mexico, if you look at the restrictive actions of the Fish and Wildlife Service in listing very aggressively new endangered species and putting those habitats out of bounds. If you look at the new regulations, including investigations on a 60-year-old practice known as fracking by the Environmental Protection Agency, each of these are designed to discourage domestic energy production and drive up the price of oil and gas. And I know it's a little jarring, as Senator Thune said, that to actually have the administration say it's their intention to drive up gasoline prices. But as you can see, matching their actions to their statements of their intentions, it's clear that this is part of the policy of this administration, and the people who are paying the price are hardworking American families who are struggling with their bills in so many other areas, now compounded with higher energy prices, and the president has nothing to offer.
Thank you, John. Thank you to my colleagues. I think Senator Thune has pegged it when he says that when the president uses the words that the Republicans have been using for years now, that we should have an all of the above policy. Either he's finally getting it, or maybe it is. This is the greatest form of flattery here. I don't think he's getting it, though, because the actions are not matching the words. And both Senator Thune and Senator Cornyn have kind of outlined some of those. The president also went on to say that the Republican plan is pretty simple. It's drill, drill, drill. And I have stated on the floor just this week and have made a concerted point of saying that, well, drilling is not the whole answer. It is clearly a part of the solution here when it comes to accessing our own energy resources within this country. So it might not be drill, drill, drill as the only solution, but drilling is a huge part of how we need to access our domestic energy resources, whether it be oil, whether it be natural gas through the fracking process, whether it's how we access our coal reserves. We have the resources, we need to access them. So he has stated that under his administration that we are seeing more increased production than at any other time. It's important to kind of peel back the onion here, though, and see where we're seeing the production. It is on state lands, it is on private lands. When you look at the activity on federal lands, we have seen a net decrease, an 11% decrease in production on federal lands when it comes to oil, and a 14% decrease on federal lands when it comes to our natural gas. So the words are not matching the actions that are coming out of this administration. You've all heard the stories about what Alaska holds in terms of our oil resources, in terms of our natural gas resources. But the fact of the matter is there is nothing that is being produced on our federal lands right now. ANWR has a potential of 10.6 billion barrels of oil, and that's the mean estimate right now. Offshore, 26 billion barrels of oil is what is estimated. Within our NPRA, the National Petroleum Reserve, another area of potential that we have not been able to formally access because we've been denied a permit to get a bridge across a river. by this administration. We've been finally moved that forward. We'd like to see some activity there. USGS just came out this past week with a new estimate for the oil and shale gas that is available up north, another 2 billion barrels of shale oil. So the potential is there, but the fact of the matter is we haven't been able to access it. So when you talk about what's happening with the price of gas today, I'm not suggesting that if we were to open up ANWR tomorrow, we're going to see the price at the pumps drop commensurately. But if we don't take the first step, if we don't try to do more as a country on our own, then we will never get there. And I hate to say we got to go back in time, but in 1995, this Congress, this Senate, passed legislation that opened up ANWR. It was vetoed by Clinton. That was in 1995. If ANWR had been advanced at that point in time, we would have oil flowing through our half-empty pipeline right now. Senator Schumer has asked the Saudis, cup in hand, give us 2 million more barrels a day. We could be providing that through the Trans-Alaska Pipeline today had not that legislation be vetoed. So if we don't start now accessing our own resources, we're never going to get to the finish line.
Thanks, Lisa. John Hope?
If you would bring those charts. I'm going to use a couple of charts. The first one is going to show you exactly what Senator Thune just said, and that is that this is the price of gasoline here on the first day of this administration, $1.85 a gallon. Shows you the price today, except we made this chart up a day or so ago, so it's actually higher now. But you can see it's absolutely doubled since this administration took office. So the second point that Senator Thune made was that the administration in response is saying, well, we need an all-of-the-above strategy. But the point is they're saying an all-of-the-above strategy, but they're not doing it. Not only are they not doing it, they're in fact blocking it. And that's the point that Senator Murkowski just made very well, and the point that I want to make by talking about the Keystone Pipeline project just a little bit. The administration's saying, hey, let's do all of the above, but then when it comes time to increase the oil and gas production in this country, or get more from our closest friend and ally in the world, Canada, not only do they not help, they block it. He denies the Keystone Pipeline, a project that would bring 830,000 barrels a day more supply to help our country, to help our needs, to help bring down the price at the pump. Furthermore, for states like North Dakota, we have 100,000 barrels a day and growing that we need to put in a pipeline. We can't get it to market. So think about the price issue. There's two aspects to it. One is supply and demand, and that's basic economics, supply and demand. More supply helps bring prices down. But there's something else going on that's very, very important, and we have to keep in mind. Right now, there's a risk premium on the price of oil. Why? Because we get 30% of our crude from places like the Middle East and Venezuela. And with the tensions in the Middle East, that's creating a risk premium on the price of oil. So what we have to do is not only increase domestic supply and supply from reliable sources like our neighbor Canada, but we also have to send a signal to the market that we're serious to reduce the speculation. We have a speculation premium right now in the price of oil. So when the president says no to projects like Keystone, or no to offshore drilling, or no to all of these things we're bringing up, he's telling the market, we're not serious about producing more oil and gas in this country. We're going to say all of the above, but we're not going to do it. So what happens? It's a global market. People go, well, they're going to have to continue to rely on getting oil from the Middle East. And the Middle East is very volatile. So they build a speculation premium in the price of oil, and that continues to grow. And that's exactly what's going on. So let's go back to the Keystone project for just a minute. Why aren't we taking the oil from Canada? Why not? Particularly when that pipeline also helps us here in the United States bring oil from places like my state of North Dakota. Well, what are the arguments folks are making? Well, the first one is that we're just going to bring that crude into the country, then we're going to export it, and so that won't help bring down prices. Yet, In June of last year, the U.S. Department of Energy released a report that said that we're going to use that crude here in the United States, and that it will bring down the price of gas. Not that it may bring down the price of gas, it will bring down the price of gas, and it will do so on the East Coast, on the Gulf Coast, and for the Midwest. So that's the U.S. Department of Energy report, June of last year. So that's one argument that doesn't hold water, that isn't accurate. What's the next argument? Well, the next argument is that, well, gee, the pipeline is going to leak. So let's look at this next chart. That somehow, the pipeline is going to leak, so we shouldn't build it. Now remember, this is the second Keystone pipeline we're building. Right here, we've already built the first one, and they say, oh, that had leaks. That has had no underground leaks. It's been in operation since 2010. When they built it, it had some small leaks at the joints, as you would expect. Those were immediately taken care of, and there are no underground leaks. So that's a second red herring that somehow it's going to leak. And furthermore, here's the pipelines that we have in the United States right now. Thousands of pipelines, millions of miles of pipeline. And we're worried about building one more because it might leak? Get real. That doesn't make any sense. So there's another argument that doesn't make sense. So then what's the final argument we hear? Well, it's that, gee, to produce the oil sands, we have to excavate. And we don't want to do that because of the environmental footprint and because it produces about 6% more greenhouse gas, right? So that's the only other argument that they've come up with. But the reality is that 80% of the new development is in situ. 80% of the new development in the Canadian oil sands is in situ, which is drilling. So you have basically the same environmental footprint and the same greenhouse gas as conventional drilling. And that's the point. With better technology, we produce more energy with better environmental stewardship. Okay, so we go through those. Those are easily understandable points, right? So why aren't we approving this project? Why aren't we moving forward? And I think that comes down to something pretty fundamental. We just passed a payroll tax cut extension, right? The administration talked about how for the average American worker, that's $1,000 a year, or $40 a paycheck, right? Get a paycheck every 2 weeks, so it's about $40 a paycheck. So per week, that's about $20 a week. Well, with gasoline at $3.73 a gallon average today, going to $4 by Memorial Day, probably $5 this summer, how fast does the average American worker pay back that $20 he got in a payroll tax cut? Pretty fast, I'd say, right? So why wouldn't the administration step up and say, hey, we need to help here? Well, go to the CNN website, and on there you'll see a letter. It's a letter from Ted Turner. Ted Turner goes through these arguments that I've just gone through and says that's why we can't have this pipeline, because we don't want any oil from Canada. We'd rather have the oil go to China. And for somebody like Mr. Turner and, wealthy people, I guess $4 or $5 gallon gasoline, that isn't much of a problem. But for the average American worker, it's a real problem. It's a real problem. So when are we going to get serious about this? When are we going to actually do all of the above rather than just say it?
Thanks, John. Jeff Sessions, ranking on budget, and also here to talk about EPA regulation.
Well, thank you very, very much. And I would say, why are we seeing such a resistance to production of oil and gas? And I believe Secretary Chu may have let the cat out of the bag when he said they really want to eliminate oil and gas as an energy source, and the price is not important to them. That's not the primary function that they're dealing with. What that means is we can see higher and higher prices, and average consumers in Alabama and all over America will pay more. They will pay the price for this social engineering strategy that we're seeing in this administration. It is just plain as day, and that's what's happening, and I hate to see it. I thought maybe we were on a different path, but that to me looks like the path that we're on. I would just add one more thing. We are seeing, as Boone Pickens Pickens once said, the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world, our purchase of energy from abroad. It transmits our money to other nations. When we can produce it in America, we keep that wealth here. We have direct jobs in the oil and gas industry, direct jobs, good paying jobs, but we also have an economic benefit in that our wealth is not drained, and I truly believe there are all kinds of benefits from that. Further, our production from federal lands is down, and as a person who's looking at the budget, I know that when oil and gas is produced on governmental lands, the government gets the royalties. They get billions of dollars and can receive offshore and onshore off government lands, tremendous amounts of benefit that go to our government and help us with our debt that we're dealing with. So for a lot of reasons, I remain very frustrated, as I think the American people are, from a sustained policy that seeks to depress the production of our tremendously valuable resource. And we know that if the Canadian product is not consumed in the United States, it will be shipped abroad, most likely to China, and will be used there. So it makes no sense for us not to partner with our good neighbor, Canada.
Thanks, Jeff. Couple questions, anybody?
Senator Hoeven and others had introduced as an amendment to the highway bill approval for the Keystone project. I'm wondering if you can talk about what you hope or what you expect will happen with that amendment.
Hope it passes. But John, they want to talk about that. We're hoping to get, first off, to get it considered, and then to get a vote on it. But you wanna talk about
That's exactly right, and we continue to make I mean, if you look at how we've worked that issue from the get-go, it's been to address the concerns or the problems that have been raised. The first piece of legislation we put forward was directly responsive to the concerns the administration expressed, and that was the portion of the route in Nebraska. So we absolutely addressed the concerns that were raised, and we've continued to do that. We have pushed this on the merits from day one. We need to have a vote, and we need to vote on the merits. This is something that will help our country. And again, it's not just this project, but it sends a signal to the global markets that we're serious about having North American energy security, and that will help take that risk premium out of the price of oil. That will help stop this steady march of higher prices at the pump.
Do you think you have enough support from your Democratic colleagues to pass it if you do get a vote?
I hope so. Please encourage them. Yeah, we're working on it. I mean, we're working on it all the time. We'll see.
Senator Thune, you serve on the Agriculture Committee. Senator Hoeven as well. You both serve on the Agriculture Committee. Agriculture is an important part of the economy in North and South Dakota. Could you explain what you're hearing from your farmers and ranchers in your state about these high energy prices and their ability to produce a crop and make a profit?
Well, agriculture is a very energy-intensive business. Fuel, diesel, fertilizer, all those things, all those inputs go up when you have energy prices going up. And so what makes agricultural profitable these days is good commodity prices, but you also have to keep your input costs under control. And we've benefited from that in the last few years because we've had good commodity prices, and farmers, although inputs continue to go up, have been able to make a decent profit, and that's kept the economies, and I think in my state, and certainly I would argue in John's as well, and other Midwestern states, really somewhat insulated from what's happening in the overall economy across the country. But when you start seeing those input costs go up and those margins tightening, it becomes much more difficult for agriculture to stay profitable. And so it has a profound impact, on the Midwest, on farm states. And you know, it's not agriculture in and of itself, but you also have in our states long distances, people travel long ways. We're also very dependent upon the travel industry. People come, we prefer they come to South Dakota, not North Dakota, but they do come to both states during the summer months in particular, and so we're very dependent upon the travel industry as well. So these economic impacts are real, and that's why, as my colleagues have pointed out, we need real solutions.
You know, let me just add one quick point. It affects every single American because our farmers and ranchers produce the food supply for this country and beyond. And so those costs, of course, have to go into the cost of producing food. So it affects every single American.
Can you respond to the White House's stance that A, there's no silver bullet on this, and B, that politicians promising lower gas prices are, I think they're using the words, fundamentally dishonest? Is it dishonest to say that gas prices could go down just through more production in the short term?
No, I mean, I think you'd have to, I'll let my colleagues speak to this, but I think you would have to really be ignorant of hundreds of years of market economies. When you have more supply, it tends to lower prices. So if you've got too much demand chasing too little supply, it tends to put prices up. So I think their argument, which to me is a very specious one, is that this isn't going to happen overnight, which Lisa pointed out perfectly. I mean, I was a freshman here, I think, back in, well, I wasn't even here yet in 1996 when they had that vote. But if we had done this 15 years ago and we had all that production in Alaska online, it'd be a very different situation today. And as Senator Hoeven has correctly pointed out, the oil is traded in a global marketplace, and oil futures, there's a lot of premium built in when there's a concern about what's happening in places like the Middle East. And so if people recognize that we were in fact serious about controlling our own destiny when it comes to energy, I think you would see not only in the near term or in the long term, but also in the near term, a very positive and favorable impact on energy prices. So I think the administration is completely out to lunch on that argument, and I think they're in a very tough spot because they now for 3 years have done nothing, absolutely nothing, to address the energy supply issue in this country, and it's creeping up on them, and it's going to have a real impact, I think, on people's pocketbooks, and that's going to get people's attention around this country.
Well, I want to add to this because everyone's looking for that silver bullet. And there really is no single answer. And the president's right, there is no quick fix. But the fact of the matter is there are fixes, there are solutions, but they take a little bit longer. We were having this conversation last year at this time. Maybe it was a little bit later. We were getting closer to the drive season because we, as lawmakers, were seeing the prices at the pump going up. We knew that it was going to be an issue. Think back to the last presidential campaign. Going into that campaign, it was all about energy prices until it wasn't. You know, what happens is we look at what's happening at the price. With the prices at the pump, and we have the arguments, well, you can't drill your way out of this, and the other side says, well, we need more wind turbines and more solar, and we don't get serious about truly a vision that takes us long term for our energy independence, which is absolutely achievable. But our own increased domestic production, it takes longer to gain access to oil in the ground. It just does. Maybe it's quicker to put up a wind turbine, and that's why there are those in this administration that say we need more. We need more of that because it's visible, it's tangible, we can see it. Well, you know what? It's not going to change the price at the pump. So what we need to do is, again, start yesterday with a production path that makes sense for this country. Let's access the resources that we know that we have and help to facilitate that, because we haven't done that part of it.
Would you anticipate Congress voting down the 5-year leasing plan when they send it up here?
Do I anticipate them voting it down?
Would Congress reject that 5-year plan because it doesn't go far enough in opening
Well,
areas, so the vote's there for that?
I don't know if the votes are there for that or not. I think we look very critically at those plans as they come forward, and sometimes you look at it and say this isn't what we want, but does it get us a little bit closer? And kind of accepting the half a loaf. I don't want to accept a half a loaf because I think we've done that for far too long, and I think that's what you're seeing play out right now when we don't have the sufficient domestic supply.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
You know, for one thing, John, one thing about Keystone is it would have a building some of those things